Let us begin. The today's daf is Masechta Bava Daf Hey. I'm going to start from the Mishnah. It's pretty straightforward, and also one sugya. So the Mishnah says, and this is on daf Daled Amid Beis by the Mishnah. Hamakif es chavera mishloish ruchaisav. Someone who, imagine a piece of land that's in the middle, and he's surrounded on four sides by somebody. Okay, so he's just the land in the middle. Now we know you don't have to. He's not required to put up a fence. He doesn't have to chip into a fence, because only if you have a garden, right, and you're growing fruits and vegetables and things like that, then you're required to chip in for a fence because we don't want you don't want somebody to stare into your business as your fruits are growing. He could give an ayin hara. But let's say if you have a little plain wheat field in the middle, so you're not required to chip in for a fence. So the Mishnah says, Hamakif es chaveiroi mishloish ruchaisav, someone who surrounds his friend from three sides. So he's in the middle, and a friend surrounded him from three sides. He has a field all around his middle area. And he put up three fences for each of the three fields that he has. So basically, he paid for the fence for the guy in the middle. We don't require him to chip in for the fourth fence. We don't require him to chip in because he's not required to pay for those fences. But it's mashma from the Tanakama that if the guy put up the fourth fence, right? He put up a fourth fence, then we would require him to chip in, the guy in the middle, because he's benefiting. Look at that. His fence is surrounded by four sides, and he didn't have to pay for it. So now he's going to require to be paid for it, but only if they put up three sides, then you don't require him to pay. But then we see Rabbi Yossi says in the Mishnah, Im Amad v'godar es harvius, if the guy that's surrounding him put up the fourth fence, megalgalin olav as a call, then he has to pay for the other three fences. So now we have to figure out what's the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. I have to say, in my house, I have behind me is Rabbi Fine's parents. So we actually we chip in. Remember, good neighbors make good fences, or good fences make good neighbors. So we chipped in for a fence, but we don't. I don't have to chip in according to the Mishnah. So the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha first follows according to Rabbi Yossi's opinion. The Amar who said, "Im Amar begodes servius," if somehow the guy put up a fence on the fourth side, megalgalin olav esakol, then he's required to pay for the other three fences. Now, who put up the fourth fence? Loishna omadnikaf. If the first guy, the guy in the middle, put up the fence, so basically somebody else paid for the three fences around him, and he put up the fourth fence. So then the one that's being surrounded, so then he shows he loved the fact that he was surrounded by three sides, then he has to pay for those three other sides. Loishna, it doesn't matter, Amad Makif. The guy that's surrounding him put up the fourth fence. Once he's already protected from all four sides, then the guy in the middle has to pay for the fence, not only on one side, but on all four sides. So that's the halacha. Loishna Amad Inikaf, Loishna Amad Makif. Itmar, now we have a teaching. Rav Huna Ama Hakoil Lefi Mashagada. When you say that the guy in the middle has to chip in for the fences, he has to chip in for no matter what the fourth guy, whatever they put up the fence, whatever the value of the fence was. If he put up an expensive fence, so then he has to chip in for that expensive fence. Chia Barav says, Hakol Lefi Dmei Konim Bezol. No, he doesn't have to pay for the expensive fence. He could say, I would have preferred that you put up a very cheap fence made of reeds and the cheaper ones. So that's what we require him to pay. We don't require him to pay what was actually put up, but what could have theoretically been put up, a cheaper fence. So now that's the machlokes. So again, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, but what do you make the guy in the middle pay? Do you make him pay for the actual cost of the wall? Or he could say, I would have preferred to have had a cheaper fence there, and that's what I'm going to pay. Tran, we learned in our Mishnah, now the Gemara is going to ask a question. Hamakif es chaver mishloish ruchaisav, a guy surrounds his friend from three sides. And then put up a fence on the first wall, second wall, and the third wall. So the guy in the middle doesn't have to pay because he's only surrounded by three sides. The fourth side is open. Haravias, but you could make a inference, even according to the Tanakama, if the guy who is surrounding him actually put up a fourth wall, then we obligate the one in the middle to pay for the walls. So now let's look at the second part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi, who technically should disagree with the Tanakama, he says, if he put up that fourth wall, he has to pay for everything. So that seems to say exactly what the Tanakama says, that you have to pay for the walls. If you're surrounded by four sides, and the guy who surrounded you put up all four walls, you have to pay for all of them. So, we can explain that there is a machloikis between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, according to Rav Huna, Damar, who said, "Akol lefi masha gadaba." You have to pay exactly what the cost of the fence was, the wall was. Hainu, now the Ika bein Tanakama Rabbi Yossi. I could find a difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Why? Tanakama sava hakol lefi demei kanam bezal in masha gadoloi. The Tanakama is lenient. He says you don't really have to pay for the cost of the wall. You could pay for the cheaper version of the wall that they could have, gone to Lowe's and bought like a couple of sticks and made a wall that way. So that's what you have to pay. Rabbi Yossi saw, but no, hakol lefi masha godar. Rabbi Yossi will hold that you have to pay exactly what the guy put up. If he put up a very expensive wall, then the guy in the middle has to pay all he has to pay for everything, what the cost of the wall. So that will Rav Huna has a way out how to explain the machloikas. El Chia Barav, but according to Chia Rab, the Oma Hakol Fi Masha Oma Shtevei Shkona Bezol, he said even Rabbi Yossi only requires you to pay the cheaper version of the fence. So Ma'ika bein Tanakam Rabbi Yossi. Then what would be the difference between Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi? If the Tanakama says that you don't have to pay even for the cheaper version of a wall, my koyavle, what would the Tanakama hold? What exactly do you have to pay for? What exactly are you going to pay for? Because the Tanakama still implies that the one that's surrounding him put up that fourth wall, the one in the middle has to pay for the walls. But what does he have to pay? If Rabbi Yossi says he paid the cheaper version of what a wall would cost, what would the Tanakama hold? Answers the Gemara, very simple teretz. According to the Tanakama, you don't even have to pay for the cost of the wall. You would have to pay for the cost of a watchman. If the cost of a wall is $1,000, and the cost of a watchman during the time that you're harvesting was $200, then you would all have to pay $200. Agar netira ika benayu. You have to pay the cost of hiring a watchman. Tanakama holds agar netira and the mekanam bezaloi. You have to pay the cost of a watchman for that few nights during the season when the field is ready to be harvested. That's what you have to pay for. The mekanam bezaloi. You don't have to pay value of a cheap fence, because the guy in the middle could say, I didn't want any fence. Rabbi Yossi Sava, Rabbi Yossi holds, to make Kana Bezal. You have to pay the value of a cheap fence. So that would be the difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. If you want, I could say a different reason. Do you have to pay for the other three walls? If the guy that's surrounding you put up a fourth wall, do you have to pay for the other three walls? Tanakama Sava, Tanakama will hold all you have to pay is for the fourth wall. But for the first, second, and third wall, you don't have to pay for. Rabbi Yossi Sava, Rabbi Yossi holds. You have to pay for the first three walls. So that would be the machlokes. If you want, I can tell you that there is a difference between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama is exactly who put up the fourth wall. The Tanakama Sava, the Tanakama holds, Taima the Amad Nikav. If the guy that's in the middle put up the wall, then he has to pay for all three walls. Because the fact that he put up the fourth wall and the one that surrounded him put up the three walls, he showed that he liked that idea that the walls are going up. So therefore, the Megalgal, if he put up the fourth wall, the Megalgal and Alav Hasakol, then he has to pay for the other three walls. Aval Amad Makif, but if the guy that surrounded him put up the fourth wall, then all he has to pay is for the fourth wall, not for the other three walls. Rabbi Yossi holds, Loishno Nikav, the Loishno Makav, doesn't matter who put up that fourth wall. Im Amad, the Godar, if the guy put up the wall, if the guy that surrounded him put up the wall, or the person being surrounded, who holds the field in the middle, if the wall goes up, Megalgal and all of us are called, then he has to pay for everything. Up until now, Rabbi Yossi seems to be more stricter than the Tanakama. Now comes the Gemara and says another version that could say that Rabbi Yossi is more lenient than the Tanakama. It depends who put up the wall, the one who does the surrounding or the one who's being surrounded. Tanakama sava im goda makif es haravias. If the guy who put up the three walls put up the fourth walls, then the guy in the middle has to pay for that fourth wall. Rabbi Yossi says he also has to pay for that fourth wall. If the guy in the middle put up the fourth wall, then he has to pay for that wall. The Galadaite, the Nichole, because the fact that the one that's being surrounded, put up that fourth wall showed that he was appreciative that he's surrounded by three walls. Avolim on the makif, if the guy that surrounded him put up that fourth wall, he doesn't have to give anything. Why? Because again, the guy that's surrounding him is like he needs to put up a wall because he wants walls there, and the guy in the middle didn't cause a loss for the guy who's putting up the walls because he was going to put up walls anyway. So something like that. And we don't require the guy in the middle to pay for any of the walls. So there's a number of different ways to review this machlekes in our Mishnah between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama as a fact that if the guy was surrounded and the surrounding person put up a third wall and then put up a fourth wall, and that's the machlekes between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama. Now we go to Daf Chei Amud Aleph, and the Gemara tells us a little story. Runya akfe Ravina ma'arbe ruchloisav. Runya was surrounded by Ravina from four sides. So Runya had a field in the middle, and on the fourth side, all four sides was owned fields by Ravina. And Ravina put up fences on all four sides. Amalei, so Ravina said now he wants Runya to chip in. Amalei havli kama de gadri. Pay me how much I paid for those fences. Lo yavlei. So Runya didn't want to chip in. Havli lefi konim bezol. Give me, if you don't want to pay for the cost of the fence, pay me what a cheap fence would cost. Lo yavlei. Runya didn't want to chip in. And remember, Runya has the field in the middle. Havli, so Ravina said, Havli agane tirusa lo yavlei. Give me the cost of what a watchman would cost you, because basically you're benefiting. Your field is now protected. I have a nice fence surrounding your field, which is in the middle. Runya didn't want to chip in. Apparently, Runya was very poor, so he didn't want to chip in with Ravina. Yom Echad, one day, have a kogoda dikre. He was cutting his dates. So Runya, who owned the middle field, was cutting dates off his trees in the middle field. Amalei laruse, so Ravina said to his sharecropper, Zil shekadim kabira de ahine. Go to his dates and start pulling off from his dates. Try to pretend that you're stealing from his dates. So Runya azalatuya Rumya Rama Beikola. When the sharecropper tried to do this, Runya started to scream, "Hey, you're stealing my dates!" Amalei, so Ravina said, "Galas daitit the meinich nichalach." It shows me that you appreciate that you have a fence there. So even if I didn't send my sharecropper to steal your dates, if it was just like a goat that came into your field to try to steal some dates, take some dates, aren't you appreciative that you have surrounded by fence? So chip in, cough up some money and pay for some of that fence. Amalei, so Runya said to Ravina, Iza ba'alma lav lachluya baya. Lav lachluya baya. Wouldn't I be, if there was a goat coming there, all I could do is just scream and the goat would fly away, wouldn't be able to steal. Amalei. So Ravina said to him, "V'lav gaver boyes the michalei," but you're not there the whole time. You would probably need a person to stand there. So when the goats start walking into your field, he'll do the screaming to scare away the goats. So basically, what Ravina is trying to do is trying to get Runya to chip in for that fence. Also, the Kame de Rava. So they came before Rava. And again, Runya was surrounded in the middle by Ravina's fences. Ravina fenced them in all in the middle because Runya owned the middle field. Amalei, so Rava said to Runya, Zul paisi b'maidi pais, go pay for something. The cheapest request that Ravina asked, the cost of a watchman if you didn't have a fence. The Eloi, but if you're not going to pay for that, the Anya Lekdina, I'm going to paskin Rav Huna Alibid Rabbi Yosi, like Rav Huna, who said according to Rabbi Yosi, because we said the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, and the halacha is like Huna, who said you have to pay Hakol Lefi Mashagoda. We said before that according to Rav Huna, who said according to Rabbi Yosi, you would have to pay for the cost of all the fences, what the actual costs are. So basically, Rava forced Ravina to at least chip in whatever Ravina asked for. If he didn't ask for the entire cost of the putting up the fence, at least pay for something. So that was the end of that story. The Gemara just says another story about Runya to prove that he was not such a rich guy. Runya Zavan Ara Amitzur de Ravina. Runya bought another field that was on the border of Ravina's field. Now the halacha is that Runya should not have bought that field, because if you have a field, the first right to purchase that field belongs to a neighbor. That's called Dina de Bar Metzra. And Runya snuck in there and bought the field that was now bordering Ravina. And Ravina himself wanted to buy that field. He didn't know that Runya bought it. Sava Ravina Lasaluke Mishim Dina de Bar Mitzra. Ravina wanted to remove Runya from the ownership of that field that bordered his field, because there's a din that he gets first rights to buy that field, and the seller should not have sold it to Ravina. Amalei Rav Safra Bereid Ravina, Amre Anisha Bar Litzala. Basically, Rav Safra said to Ravina, you have to let Runya have a pass on this one. Why? Because he basically buys leather for 4, and then he has to make shoes, pay a worker to make shoes from leather for another 4, and then he probably sells it for 9. So he makes very little money, and therefore you should have some compassion on him and allow him to have a field right next to yours so he can be able to make money. There's many different shatim on that last piece, but the bottom line is that that Rav Safra told Ravina, let Runya leave him with the field. You're in the right, because you really should have been the right to have that field because you're the neighbor. But Runya is a poor guy. Don't ruin his opportunity to make money on a field. Says the Mishnah. Two guys agreed to build a wall. Let's say they agreed to build a wall, and it was a 10-amma wall. So and it collapsed. So then we require them to chip in to rebuild the wall, but they don't have to rebuild it as 10 ammas. They can rebuild it as 4 ammas. Let's say one guy claims that, I paid for the rebuilding of the wall, and the other guy didn't chip in. So we don't believe him, because we assume that both chipped in, unless the one that claims that the other person didn't chip in proves it. Because this is an obvious halacha. If they both own the wall and it collapsed, they both know that they have to chip in to build a wall, albeit not as high as the original wall, but at least 4 ammas, at least 8 feet, an 8-foot wall. If one guy who says, let's build it the way it was, let's build it back up to 10 ammas, we don't obligate the other party to agree to that. Because yes, he agreed that the wall should be there, but we don't require him to pay for a wall that goes up to 10 ammas. But let's say the other guy who built a very high wall. He made it 10 amas high, and the other guy says, "I'm going to build another wall on my property that will be adjacent to that wall, so that I'm going to put a roof between the two walls, so you can walk in between. That'll be a nice place, to cool off." So even though they didn't build a roof there, he has to pay for now we require him to pay for the additional height. And we can assume he didn't pay for it. He didn't pay for the extra additional height above 4 amas that the other guy that the other guy built, because that is not so obvious that you have to pay for. So we can assume that the person that built the wall and built it the height, he didn't get any chip in. No, he didn't get any assistance from the other party, from the other person, and therefore we can assume that the other guy didn't chip in unless he can prove that he chipped in for the height of that wall. Look at the Gemara. Amar Shlakish. A guy loaned money and now he has to pay. And he says, I paid before the due date. You pay the loan before the due date. Ein enemen, you're not believed. Why? Because most people don't pay their loans early. They wait till the last minute and then they pay the loan. And Rish Lakish says a nice statement. Levai shifer bezmane. I wish everybody would pay their loans on time. But to say that a person has the assumption that he paid the loan early, that we don't say. Abaye v'Rav Amri Tavayo, Abaye v'Rav both say, of the inish depar beguy's money, you find people pay a loan early. Why? Sometimes a person gets a hold of money of Amma Ezel Pray. So he says right away, when I just let's say inherited money or something like that, or won the lottery, or he sold something. So he says, let me go pay my loans early. And that happens. So I shouldn't be believed. We go to Ches Heyam Beis. So now the Gemara says, we learned in our Mishnah, Becheskas Nosan. A guy, you assume that he gave the money to build the wall, which is up to 4 amas, and we assume that he gave until he proves that he didn't give it. What's that case? The guy says, the partner said, I paid it after the wall was built. After you built the 4 amas, I paid. So we could assume he paid for it. Everybody knows he has to pay for it. Elalav, the Amalei, it's Beratich Besoichman. He's saying, I paid it even before you completed the wall. Alma, so we see from our Mishnah, Ovid Inish de Parai Besechmane, that people do pay their loans before the time is due. So you see from our Mishnah, a person can pay a loan before it's due. And says the Gemara, when you're building a wall, the guy is putting up a wall, so then that's also the time to pay. So then you can say that a person would pay early, but a loan which has a plain loan which has a due date, nobody pays it before the due date because nothing's being built, right? It's just a plain due date. So the Rav Shlokish can still hold his opinion that there's a chazaka, nobody pays their loan early, and if a person says he paid his loan early, we don't believe him. Tashma, come here. We'll stop in a minute. If a guy built. The one guy built from 4 amas to 10 amas, and he wanted to collect the money from the other party and say, hey, chip in for the height of that wall. And the other guy, we assume that he didn't pay for it until he proves that he paid for it. Hey, Chidami, what's that case? What's the other guy saying? I paid for it. Amai loy. Why wouldn't he be believed? He paid after the height of the wall was built. I paid early. He's saying that I paid early. Alma lo'ovid inish depar beguy's money, and the reason why he's not believed, the Mishnah says, is because most people will not pay until after the construction project is finished. So this is not like Rosh Lakish, and says the Gemara. This is not like Rava, Abai and Rava, who say that a person could complete their project, would pay if they have money early. And says the Gemara, Shani Hocha, the reason why a person will not pay is because he'll say, maybe I'm not required to pay for the extra height. He's going to assume that I'm not required to pay. But a loan, you know you're going to have to pay. So according to Bai Rava, you sometimes, if you get money, you'll pay early. So the Gemara concludes, Rapapa Rav Huna B'rei Rishua Avikabai Rava. They paskin like a Rabbi of Rava, that sometimes you can believe a person if he says, I paid my loan early. Ma'abar Ravashi Avik Resh Lakish. Ma'abar Ravashi says, we don't believe anybody who says, oh, I paid my loan early. If a guy says that, we don't believe him. The Hilchis is Resh Lakish. Now, Allah is like Resh Lakish. Even if we're collecting from Yosayim. If you're trying to collect a loan from, let's say you loaned the father and he died, and he owed you the money and you didn't collect, so you have to swear that you didn't get the money, and then you could collect from the possessions of the assignment. But if the loan term didn't reach, if it wasn't the time to reach the loan, right? So then you don't say you can collect even without a shvuah, because we could assume the father that died never paid the loan early. Chazaka, this is the assumption, and this is what we paskin. Like Ovid inish the parabagayus money. Nobody pays a loan too early. They wait till the last minute to pay the loan, and then they pay the loan. So therefore, we paskin like Rish Lakish. Okay, we will stop right over here.